Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here with another Sunday session, and tonight is open mic night, which is your chance to ask me absolutely anything that you've got on your mind. Now, tonight is a very, very special version of that. Tonight is the 2026 budget review version. The number of questions I've been getting from this has been insane, and especially given the fact that we just had a webinar on this only a couple of nights ago with regards to the opportunity that has presented itself in the market if you are a property developer. There's some negative implications if you are an investor, but it's created some massive opportunities for being a developer. Now, excuse me, folks, I do have, I guess, a challenge with my throat at the moment. I will be coughing from time to time, so please excuse me as we go. Now, before we go into the questions, I thought I'd just give you a little bit of a wrap up, a summary of all the impacts that have actually happened. There's been lots of flipping and flopping with all the changes and backflips that have happened since the announcement at budget night. But let me give you the wash up as I've interpreted it. So this is, I guess, the brief summary of what the implications are. Firstly, the removal of negative gearing on existing dwellings. So any purchase for any new dwelling since budget night, I guess, can claim that negative gearing for a very, very small period of time up until the 1st of July 2027. Okay, excuse me. Similarly, the removal of the 50% capital gains tax discount on the existing dwellings, and again, you can temporarily claim that up until the 1st of July 2027. But once the 1st of July 2027 comes in, then negative gearing will be removed from the table on those existing dwellings, and the 50% CGT will disappear, and both of those will be replaced with the 50% CGT will be replaced with a tiered CGT that's linked to inflation, with a minimum of a 30% tax from a CGT perspective. So that's a huge implication with regards to that. And any second-hand dwelling or existing dwelling, I guess, that is purchased from that date onwards, will no longer be able to apply for either of the old incentives. If you have an existing property that you have already owned before the announcement on budget night, then you have been grandfathered in, which means that that protection from the negative gearing and the 50% CGT is still in place for you. So congratulations, your investment is still protected. But, and there's a very big but here, the but is because of the implications of this from an investor's perspective, all of the investors have now left that part of the market. And so when you eventually go to sell your property, you will only be limited to, I guess, any owner-occupiers that may want the property, or if you have development potential on your property, those people would have some interest in it. But any investors have now run away. And they've run away in favor of what got replaced. So what got replaced is that if there is a brand spanking new build, and more precisely, if that brand new build is as a result of a new dwelling being added to supply, so that is the output of a property developer, then the negative gearing and the CGT 50% discounts would uplink. So what we've seen is a massive move of investors from, I guess, buying second-hand property to buying brand spanking new property. Now, I know that for a fact. I've had dozens and dozens of buyer's agents actually reaching out to me saying all of their clients have pivoted and now want to be starting to buy this brand spanking new stock. And because of the size of our community, they are looking for us to actually supply that. So I'm pleased to say that we have actually put some commercial arrangements in place where you can exit your brand spanking new stock, and more specifically, excuse me, if it is, that is, it's an off the plan type sale, but whilst it's actually under construction, They are wanting that when it's approaching occupancy rate, so the occupant being in place. So if you are 2 or 3 months out from your occupation certificate coming into place and you have not yet engaged a real estate agent, then we've got a distribution channel for you where the buyer's agents are wanting to buy this stock, and we've got a ton of people that are swarming towards that, and over 250 agents that are very opportunity. And so what that means is you can sell your stock through that buyer's channel with zero commission, folks, absolutely zero commission. And the reason is buyer's agents get paid by their client, and so they are not looking for a commission from you because they can't get paid from both sides of the transaction. So there's an opportunity for you to now add anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 per dwelling, and you might have multiple dwellings in your project, back to your bottom line by not paying agents commission. So that opportunity has opened itself up. Equally, I guess the other changes that have happened is limited recourse lending has been removed from residential properties in self-managed super funds, which means that now super funds are no longer purchasing investment properties as well. So that all of that is the market has plummeted like a stone. We're seeing big implications with regards to markets going down, particularly, excuse me, let me take a sip. Particularly in Sydney and Melbourne, we're seeing huge implications with regards to that, but all other markets are slowing. So what it's creating is, I guess, the huge buying opportunity now is presenting itself with second-hand property that now has development potential, because as a developer, we're no longer competing with investors on that stock, okay? And we've now got an army of people that are now wanting brand spanking new stock. And so what that's creating is a disparity between buy price and sell price, which is now opening up and making property development I guess, more profitable than it has been in a very, very long period of time. So that opportunity has existed, it has come about as a result of the budget. And so as a net result of all of that, I guess it's created a lot of questions and turmoil and that sort of thing in the market. And so everybody's saying, hey, Rob, what does this mean? What does that, how can we actually understand the implications of this in our particular world? And so as a result of that, tonight, having a huge number of questions, all on budget, that's what we're actually going to go into. Now, I have to be very, very clear here, folks. I am not an accountant. I'm not a lawyer, that sort of thing. But people are asking me for, what do I know? What do I understand? What is my opinion? So I'm going to give you my understanding of these things, and it's super critical that you must go and actually seek advice from your relevant accountant and or solicitor, depending upon what it is that we're actually to do that. So I'm going to leave that little disclaimer sitting here for the remainder of the show, given the nature of what we're talking about. Okay, so that said, let's go into the questions that we're actually being given here. First one comes from Andrew. Andrew says, given the volatility in the market, what premium would you pay, in brackets, above market rates, for absolute certainty of your project budget and program? I asked this in relation to alternative delivery methodologies such as volumetric modular, where the costs may be higher, but budgets and programs are more controlled. So interesting question, Andrew. Whilst it isn't specifically budget related, it is talking about the volatility that's being caused by the budget. What I'm going to say to you, my friend, is that I have some fantastic opportunities here buying cheap and being able to sell high. So that volatility is actually creating opportunity for you, as opposed to something that you want to be avoiding. It's something you want to lean into and go, how do I actually take advantage of this buying window that's going to be open for the next little while? Now, where you're talking about absolute certainty on delivery methodologies, prefabrication comes in many, many forms, and you're talking about volumetric in particular. but we are trying to work on some solutions that we are going to be bringing to the community very, very soon, with both volumetric, and modular construction technologies and suppliers that are able to deliver very, very timely and cost-effective solutions. Now, it is absolute that there is some potential misnomers with regards to the costings and savings and that sort of thing. Everybody thinks that you're going to get an absolute saving when you're using these technologies, but typically the saving that you're really getting isn't in the cost of construction, but rather in time. So you're able to deliver these much, much faster. And because you're delivering them much faster, you're in and out of the same market where you can actually understand and control the implications of what you're selling into. And equally, you reduce profitability. So if you add all these layers together, you've got cheap buying, great demand for selling, because we've got three competing markets that are actually buying this brand new stock now. We've got all the investors that have run to it. We've got first home buyers who are incentivized to buy brand new with discounts on stamp duty and building bonuses and things like that. And we've also got foreign investment buyers can only buy brand new. Those three competing people are now going to push the price of brand spanking new property. Then you've got the ability for selling with no commission because of the fact that we've got the exits through all the buyers agents that we've managed to actually put together. And then lastly, you've now got prefabrication that's going to compress your timelines and reduce some of your holding costs. All of that makes this not the most volatile, but most opportunistic time. I'm going to say that there's been a very long period of time to say we should be thinking very seriously. If you are an investor in the past, you should be very much thinking about, is property development the way for you? And you can manufacture these things at wholesale rate, not retail rate. My humble apologies. I don't even have a cold, folks. I've got got some challenges with my throat where I'm starting to lose my voice. And so become a little bit problematic. So apologies again for my coughing. Now, next question comes from Mike. Mike says, commercial properties dodged the negative gearing bullet. Do you think a chunk of that mum and dad capital that would have gone into a 700K unit now is going to end up in a sub $5 million commercial instead? Now, let me be very, very clear. If your borrowing capacity was 700K on a residential, your borrowing capacity on a commercial is going to be very, very similar. I don't think you're going to go from a 700K residential property to a $5 million commercial property. That disparity just doesn't make sense. Now, you may go from 700 to maybe $1 million because that commercial property might potentially be positively geared. That is possible, but you would not have that 700K million. So I don't think that's going to really play out at all, Mike. But will people be looking at that? The answer to that is absolutely yes. Now, my partner is a commercial buyer's agent, and she I guess struggles to find sub $1 million commercial properties because that's where most people's buying power is, but there are not many properties that are that sized that are an attractive asset to actually get. So I think whilst a lot of people might want to be pivoting towards that, I don't think the opportunities are there because those sub $1 million properties are with any meaningful return and de-risking the actual asset. So that said, will some people go and look at it? But I think more people are going to be looking at pivoting to property development where they're manufacturing the brand new assets. So one, they can keep a couple of those if they want to over time. And two, I guess they've got the exits locked in place with those three buying groups I mentioned before, all interested and herding towards those, which makes that profitability very, very attractive. So I'm going to see more investors coming into the development space than I am going to see investors going into the commercial space. Next question, also from Mike. He says, regarding the new tax treatment on trusts, Have you got any early reaction on how to approach this from a tax minimization perspective? I guess that's bordering on the advice side of things, Mike, so I'm not going to talk to that. What I will say is that my own personal accountant will be presenting at our Brisbane meetup in the next week or so, and he'll be talking about exactly that. So that's the kind of place that you would actually dial in and ask him the question, because he's qualified on actually answering it. What I would be saying, though, in that regard is that I guess it depends on the asset that you're holding in there. So if you have a business, what they've said is that they are going to have a rollover relief, so you can change your business from, I guess, a trust into a company and that sort of thing. And there's going to be a window, which I believe is 3 years. But from a property perspective, if you have an asset sitting in a property sitting in a trust, you might get a CGT relief because that is the federal government, but stamp duty relief is done by the state government. And there's been no indication by any of the states at this point in time that they would be willing to waive that for you to pivot that into another entity. So now you've got to contemplate, do I actually pay the cost of actually transferring that, or do I wear the implication of the fact that it's going to stay in this asset, in this entity right now? So that said, that's the kind of question that you want to be giving to Peter from Complete Business Advisory when he presents at the Brisbane meetup, which is in 2 weeks' time. So you should go and catch that. I can assure you it's going to be worth it. Next question comes from Nam. Nam says, some people have suggested that investors may rush to sell before the new tax changes take effect. However, other argues the opposite, that investors are actually in a relatively favorable position, keeping the negative gearing and the 50% discount on the gains they accrued before that date, giving them little incentive to sell. What's your view? Do you expect investors to hold rather than exit the market? Nam, that's a really good question, and it is really opinion. Firstly, what I'm seeing in the market is dropping like a stone, and so anyone who's thinking of selling would be selling into a falling market, and you don't want to try and catch a knife in a falling market. So if the market is dropping, you don't want to add momentum to that. And so I guess there's a potential challenge here with regards to they might want to sell for fear. But the reality is, I think most of them are actually going to hold. They're going to hold, hoping that the market actually recovers, because they've lost $50,000 to $150,000 per property, depending upon what they hold and where they hold it, in the last 6 to 8 weeks, and they'll be wanting to hold on to that and try and claw that back. And the only way to do that is wait for time. Now, will it recover? The answer is it will eventually recover. Now, how long that takes is the unknown that we don't really know about at this point in time. And yes, those people will be able to protect those things, but as I touched on before, all of the investors have left the market, right? They've left that secondhand stock. So when you sell your investment property later on, the hope that another investor will pick it up, I don't think is going to be there. The hope is that you have an attractive property for an owner-occupier, and they will pay for it, or B, that secondhand property has some development potential, and you would either A, develop it yourself, or B, sell it to a developer. So I think there's a lot of people, like you said, that are mixed in their thoughts here. They want to try and sell it while there is some confusion and that sort of thing. But I think most of them are actually going to hold. Now, that said, that's not what I'm doing, right? So I am selling at least one of my assets in this particular instance, knowing that I've got the discounts there and that sort of thing, but because I'm seeing the huge opportunity in buying into this depressed market. And so I'm saying, look, I'm going to get rid of one asset and pick up a development asset where I can actually manufacture a lot more money out of it. So I'm using it as an opportunity to liquidate my stock and actually cash in, and I'm going to reload on that cash, as opposed to, hey, I'm just trying to get rid of it now just because I'm going to cash in my discount. It's more that I want to buy while the buying is good. As Warren Buffett says, be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful. And a lot of people are fearful right now, so the market is dropping. So why should we not, I guess, try and use that as an opportunity? Now, the next question comes from Paul. Paul says, Michael Matusik, he's a property economist who reports on the market. Michael Matusik's described the government's $2 billion local infrastructure fund as, inverted commas, more headline than substance, arguing it won't make a materially increase in the housing supply. Do you agree? If you were designing the policy, where would you invest the money to genuinely move the needle on housing affordability and supply? So a double banger question. Okay, firstly, let me just explain. There is $2 billion allocated to local infrastructure to be spread across the country. Now, local infrastructure being water, sewer, electrical, roads, that sort of thing, going into largely greenfield developments. So greenfield developments are then where new housing supply for the big developers can actually roll out. And so that infrastructure is going to go in there. Now, I don't think that the government can roll that out in an efficient manner. I think it's going to be subsidized for the developers to actually go, the developers are typically the ones building it anyway. So there are going to be some level of subsidies go towards that. Now, the $2 billion goes towards the local government, and the local government then, I guess, reimburses it in some way, shape or form. But the detail's not there, and hence why I understand why Michael Matusik's saying that I guess that it's more headline than substance, because there's no specificity, for want of a better word, on how that's actually going to be delivered. And certainly from what I can see in how they've rolled out some of their other initiatives, the traction just takes so long to get out there. So I tend to agree. I don't think it's going to make any material change at this moment in time. Now, the second part of the question, what would I do if I was designing the policy? Oh boy, I would rip and shred what they have done here. Now, whilst there are huge benefits to me as a developer and us as a community, the way they've done this is just horrendously wrong. Now, here's how I would do this. Now, if you are in federal government, local government, or the like, please listen carefully. You do not get more of something by taxing it. Let me say that again. You do not get more of something by taxing it. What you need incentives to actually create this stock. Now, the taxes that apply, when we talk housing affordability, this is an absolute joke, because depending upon the jurisdiction, anywhere from 40 to 50% of the purchase price of a property is some form of tax, either directly or indirectly, by all the different layers of government. So when we talk about housing affordability, seriously, government, get the fuck out of the way. You are causing this problem up front. And yes, I swore on camera, I don't care. You guys are just destroying this. Here's what I would do, Paul. Your question, what would I do differently? Why don't we incentivize the developer when they are purchasing a property? I have to pay stamp duty on the way in. Now, that stamp duty cost has to get passed on to the ultimate buyer in the end. So my stamp duty coming in, I have to make a profit. I have to cover my costs. I have to pass that on to the end user. Now, when they purchase, they are also paying stamp duty. And now I've bought one and I've created many. Now that's many lots of stamp duties that are then going to be created. So why do you not credit me back for the stamp duty that I have paid on the way in, so I can sell it at a cheaper price? Because if I don't sell it at a cheaper price, housing affordability means that they're not going to buy it. Now, if they don't buy it, then that means that my deal doesn't make sense. And if my deal doesn't make sense, that means that I'm not going to buy it. So, so by charging me stamp duty on the way in and charging them stamp duty on the way out, you're actually killing the feasibility of the deal. Instead, give me a time window. Let's just say 3 years. And within 3 years, I create more stock out of that, and I multiple lots of multiple properties that generate multiple lots of stamp duty. Give me a credit on the one that I did on the way in. I can pass that saving onto the end buyer. I'm happy to cash flow it at the start. Maybe I don't develop it in time and you can get to keep my stamp duty. But if I do, give me the credit, I can pass it on, reduces the cost of the housing, makes it more affordable, makes it actually financially viable, and then it will actually move forward. Now, do that exact same methodology with land tax. If I pay land tax on the way through and I'm generating many, many things, then you're going to get many, many lots of land tax later on. So again, give me a credit on that. You're just putting fat on top of fat on top of fat. There's tax on top of everything. So that tax that I've got as I pay in, later on when I sell that GST has to recover on top. So I've got GST on that margin of the stamp duty on top. So it's layers on top of layers. Jesus Christ, folks. You're taxing the whole system to the point where it's slowing to a crawl. You've got to get out of the way. So apologies for the rant, apologies for the swearing, but seriously, we've got to do something different. And adding more taxes to the system, Albo, you need to be, the reform needs to be enabling the economy, not crippling the economy, not changing, punishing people for incentivizing them for actually doing things that are good. Anyway, that end of round, I'm going to leave that one alone because that's got my goat. Next one comes from Simon. Now, Simon's got a series of questions here, so I'm going to rattle a few of them off. So some commentators have described this as one of the most significant shifts in Australian property and tax policy in decades. And are those concerns overblown, or do you think these reforms could fundamentally change the Australian property market? And then he's got some sub questions that sit underneath that. So firstly, let me answer that. My voice is killing me. Firstly, let me answer that. The answer is yes, it's one of the most significant things in the economy. It's not just the housing market. It is the fact that they have taxed it on absolutely everything. So you're being taxed on crypto, you're being taxed on shares, you're being taxed on, I guess, your company that might be doing business in a trust. They've just whacked in so much tax. It is a money grab and nothing more than money grab. And what it's going to do, it is going to absolutely cripple our economy, not just from a housing supply perspective, but from a whole bunch more. Now, what it's going to do, in their own budget, they predicted it was going to create 35,000 less houses on top of the already close to 400,000 housing shortfall that they wanted to achieve in the housing accord when they said they wanted 1.2 million homes. So they've just added another $350,000 burden. That was on budget night. Then since budget night, the deal that they did with the Greens, where you can no longer do the limited recourse lending for your super funds, that is projected to be another 40,000 less supply that is actually going to be created out of that, because super funds are one of the ones that actually do buy brand new stock and buy off the plan and all sorts of things like that. So do I think there's going to be a fundamental shift? Yes. And the noise that you are hearing in the economy with all the social political commentators and business owners and all that sort of stuff, that noise is real. That is genuine people in genuine pain saying enough is enough. We've been taxed to oblivion. It's got to stop. So Do I think it's overblown? No, is the question, Simon. Absolutely no. Then he's got some sub-questions. So wealth creation specifically, he says, some critics argue that tax changes will make it much harder for everyday Australians, particularly younger generations, to build wealth through property. Do you think that's a fair concern? Yes, I think that's a fair concern. I think this does absolutely nothing with regards to helping, I guess, young Australians get in. As a matter of fact, the stupidity in what they have done with regards to the order that they did things, the 5%, I guess, deposit scheme to get into a property sounds great in principle until you crash the market the moment you've done it. And now you put all of those people who struggled to get into the market in the first place, now they're underwater and they owe more than their property is worth. Now, if you were going to do these things and you had any common sense, you would have swapped the order around and you would have crashed the market, then given them 5% deposit. How the frig do these people think that this is actually a smart idea to do it in the order that they did it? Stupidity is an understatement. Next question, capital flight. Do you think these changes risk driving investment capital out of Australia? Could investors simply choose investments in other asset classes or overseas markets instead? Well, unfortunately, no. And the reason is that the ATO rules about investing money overseas means that it is still deemed to be controlled from Australia, which means it's still deemed to be an Australian investment. So all of the capital gains tax rules are still going to apply to any investment that you do anywhere for anything. So they've got you trapped. I don't think Australian money is going to leave the country. Okay, so I think there'll be people who leave the country, and so they will take all of their money with them, but there will not be people who stay here and try to invest overseas. As a matter of fact, there are reports that I have seen in the vicinity of 142,000 millionaires left Australia last year. Now, I don't know if that number is true, but the reports are 142,000 millionaires left Australia. Now, that's 142,000 people that were paying taxes here in Australia and contributing meaningfully to society. Those people are now no longer contributing to our society. So those taxes have now gone, and we've got to find a way to bring them back. Okay. Next question, institutional investors. One concern we've heard that these changes could give institutional investors an even greater advantage over individual investors. Is this a risk that large funds and corporations will end up owning a large share of Australian housing stock? Not only is this a risk, this is actually their intent. Okay, so I cannot stress this enough. They are the super funds and the large institutional investors were complaining that these little mum and dad investors were getting in their way and they couldn't make their investments commercially viable. And so the government has bent over and royally shafted the mum and dad investor, and they've given a huge number of investments to incentives to overseas institutional investors. So things like if you are doing build to rent, you can get, firstly, you're going to get a 15%, I guess, instead of your company being 25 or 30% tax on your company, it's going to be 15%. Your land tax is going to be reduced to 15%. Sorry, land tax is reduced by 50% in almost every single state. They're also getting incentives with regards to the capital gains tax being capped at only, I think it's 10%. I could be wrong on that particular number, but all of this is giving all of our money and all of our properties to overseas money where they are not paying anywhere near the tax that we are paying. So if this was truly about housing supply, it would not be incentivizing institutional investors to build to rent. Okay, so those people are coming in for one reason often, only pure profit. Okay, and that pure profit is not being taxed at the same rate that the everyday Australians were actually investing in. Now, here's the stupidity of all of this: 80% of all housing stock is needed in the burbs, right? But when we're doing these build to rent models, these are not in the burbs. Okay, so people want to live in houses and townhouses. They don't want to live in high-rise apartments over and over. So what it's going to do is just massively change our entire dynamic. I think it is just bad, and they did not engage with organizations like us, who have the largest community of small-scale developers in the country. They did not engage with us and say, what is the impact on what that is actually going to mean? I think it's devastating of what they're doing and incentivizing these institutional investors. Now, as a property developer, I am going to benefit from this because there's going to be a lot of people wanting to buy my stock. But from an Australian investor, I did 20 years of buy and hold investing, and a lot of you out there are doing buy and hold investing. You've just been royally shafted, and for no reason at all, other than to give the self-managed super funds, I guess, all of the ability to actually do these things. This is turning into a rant, folks, and this was never my intention. So please forgive my passion. With regards to housing supply, the government says that these reforms will improve housing affordability. In your view, will they actually increase housing supply, or will they have the opposite effect? I'm thinking they're going to have the opposite effect. That is one of the things that's going to supercharge and fuel me as a developer, is that they are the 35,000 less that they predicted in the budget, plus another 40,000 less that came after the budget was announced with the limited recourse lending and super funds, means that the supply is going to be so much lower, which means that the demand is so much higher, which means that the profitability for me is going to be fantastic. But that doesn't help many others. I think it's not going to impact this. So it's not going to have the impact that they think. It's going to create a two-tiered market. Second-hand properties is going to be at this price. Brand new properties is going to be at this price. And that gap has always been there, but the gap was much, much smaller before. Now it's going to be much larger. And I think that is going to be, I guess, built into the system now, that gap is much larger. So I don't think it's going to do anything with housing affordability at all. But I think it will create more supply in the long run. But the very reforms they've projected themselves in the short run will not do that. So investor behavior. Some people believe investors won't simply switch into new housing to retain tax benefits. Instead, they may move their money into shares, REITs, or overseas investments. How do you see investor behavior changing? Well, I'm seeing it already. I've got tens of buyers agents already reaching out to me saying, can they buy brand spanking new stock? And because that's where they're going to get the relief from a negative gearing perspective. The 50% capital gains tax, discounts only on brand spanking new property. But for all of the other investments that you said, so shares, REITs, cryptos, all those sorts of things, you are not going to get the 50% CGT discounts. You're going to get an indexed system that's tied to CPI with a minimum 30% tax. So no, I do not see anyone going to those other investments. And again, they can't invest overseas because that's still deemed to be an Australian controlled asset. So the taxes are going to be charged here in Australia. So no, I don't see that pivoting at all. Now, Australia's competitiveness. Could these tax changes make Australia a less attractive place for investment? What impact might that have in a long-term economic growth? Okay, two parts to this. It's going to make Australia a very, 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 very attractive place to invest if you are a managed investment scheme wanting to do build to rent. They have given these guys rolled out a red carpet for them. I think that is going to create a huge number of institutions coming over here and doing that kind of product. That will create some construction activity, and yes, that will generate some activity, but we are not, and I mean we are not actually creating anything that we can export, okay? And what we really need when we talk about long-term economic growth, we need to be manufacturing things that we send overseas and selling that to other jurisdictions. What this does, it's a tax on every business to actually work hard and actually try and grow and employ people. And why would somebody want to start a business and go through all of that effort and all of that risk and not pay themselves only to have so much of it ripped away from you with your capital gains tax? I think it's going to have a long-term economic impact, yeah, but in all the wrong ways, and all the wrong ways from a business perspective. I see Australia's economy slowing to a crawl, and we will not be doing the exports that we need to. Now more than ever, the only thing that can save us, given what they have actually done, is to, I guess, lift the taxes on things like coal, iron ore, I guess gas, those resources. That's the only way we're actually going to get any recovery into our economy at all, or turn off the taxes. Young Australians, what do these reforms mean for young Australians trying to build wealth? Are we making it harder for future generations to get ahead? In short, yes. Now the young Australians, in order to save for their deposit, cannot get into smaller investments like shares and cryptos and that sort of thing, where they can put small amounts of investment into to build their base to get a deposit. They can't without being overly taxed. And so the ability for them to get into it, unless they go into a 5%, I guess, deposit scheme, and you saw how successful that's been, I don't think that's going to work. Now, I think the 5% deposit scheme was well intentioned. I think the morals and the intention that was sitting there were well-meaning, but they did the wrong order. The taxes that just came into effect from the budget, sure, the 5% discounts, because what it's done is it's just put a whole bunch of people in a whole bunch of pain. So I do not think that this is the problem of the 5% deposit. I think this is a problem of the fact that they did the order of those two the wrong way round, and I guess the treasurer didn't really think that through to understand the implications of that and how many people are going to be hurting. Young Australians going to make it harder to build wealth? Yes. All the rhetoric that they're putting out, I think, is false and misleading and just plain gaslighting, to be brutally honest. Okay, inflation and government spending. Some argue that continued government deficits and spending will keep inflation higher for longer, make it harder to improve affordability. Do you agree with that assessment? Yes, they're doing nothing to reduce their spending, and we are not far away from having our $1.2 trillion debt ceiling hit, and at that point we are not allowed to borrow any money anymore, and just the sheer cost of interest is actually going to be hurting us. That's why they're actually doing this, because they can't afford the spending that they've already got out there. So do I think that it's going to cause problems with inflation? Yes. As a matter of fact, they are talking about, not far away, us potentially triggering a recession, and having lived through 3 recessions now, including the one that Paul Keating said was the recession that we had to have, where interest rates were 17%. It is not pretty going through that, but I fear, unfortunately, that is probably potentially potentially on the horizon if they don't very, very carefully manage their spending habits right now. Next question from Andrew. Do you expect the new tax settings to shift investor demand away from existing properties and towards new builds, potentially increasing competition for Absolutely. Not only do I expect it, I'm already seeing it right now, because the new stock, you can those negative gearing and the 50% CGT, that applies right this very second. Nobody needs to wait for the 1st of July. If they want to buy brand new stock, they get all those incentives right now. So yes, that can and will be a thing, and is a thing, and that's one of the reasons why we put in place the distribution channel through the buyer's agents to say all these buyer's agents are screaming for it. So yes. Next part of his question says, do you think this could influence development timing with builders and developers potentially staging projects to align with the 1st of July 2027 threshold? No, because you can actually do that right this very second. Now, why people are confused about this, and I want to be very clear on why they're confused about it, because there were two pieces of information that read independently were contradictory to each other, but when you read them together, they have a very, very specific meaning. So piece of information number one, any purchase from it through to the 1st of July 2027, that purchase in that window could claim the negative gearing and could claim the 50% CGT. But if it got past the 1st of July 2027, so when it got to that point, it would disappear, and the 50% CGT would be at an end at that point, and then the indexed, CGT regime would then cut in. That's piece of information number one. Piece of information number two, any brand new build from the 1st of July 2027 onwards would get the 50% CGT and the negative gearing. So those two pieces of information listened to separately would mean that you would think that that's only when the brand new build comes together. But now, if I purchase from now, I get my negative gearing and my 50% CGT. And if it happens to be brand new, post 1st of July 2027, I'm going to get my negative gearing and my CGT discount. So no, I don't think we need to be staging our projects to align with 2027. I don't think that needs to happen at all. So I think, and I'm seeing this happen right now, we've got investors wanting brand new stock as we speak. So folks, bring them through our channel. Go to Development Sites Australia, that is development.site, and you're going to be able to exit your stock through there. Kate says, how do you think the new rules will apply to investors who purchase land now but complete constructions after the 1st of July 27? Will they still be eligible for benefits like the 50% CGT discount, negative gearing, or is this a clear cutoff? So a couple of things here, Kate. So I guess you as a developer, you are not going to do CGT. You as a developer are going to get GST. No implication, no change to you. If you when you finish the finished product, when you sell that at the end, you're selling it post 1st of July 2027, that is deemed to be brand new stock at that point in time. The purchasers of that, if they are investors, would get the negative gearing and would get the CGT discounts. So going to be an issue. Okay, next one. No name on these ones. So these came from the webinar that I run the other night on the budget as well. So Rob, in your opinion, is it both likely and practical that these new changes could be reversed by future government, or would unwinding them be too complex? So really interesting question, and I guess I'm not a political commentator, so I'm not that deep into the politics, other than looking at opinion polls and things like that. So I'm not going to say this is a qualified response, but rather conjecture from what I'm seeing. Firstly, they've been trying to reverse negative gearing for close to 40 years. Okay, close to 40 years. anything that has been pushed and pushed and pushed to try and get through, and it's taken 40 years to get through, can and will take just as long to turn over. Now, last time it got changed, it got reversed in 2 years because of a change in government, where at that point in time, and again, I'm not picking sides here, the party that had, I guess, the casting vote in the day was more center leaning. So they weren't to the left and they weren't to the right, and they were really center leaning, which means that they were looking at the policies on their merits. And when they saw when they said, yes, let's put it in, and then they saw it didn't work, they were more than happy to reverse it and flick it the other way. So from that perspective, that point in time, you could see that flip-flop happen. At this point in time, the controlling party, the casting vote, are the Greens, who are more left-facing, and they want to keep it left-facing. And so unless there's a huge majority that get in on the right, that casting vote, I think, will keep it where it is. And so I think that's the distinction here between when it got reversed last time and when it got and the chance for it to get reversed this time. It would have to be an absolute to go on to the right side of things for that to occur. And whilst there is a whole bunch of groundswell at the moment away from the current government, I'm not sure that the groundswell is big enough at this moment in time to make that happen. If we were to have an election today, would that occur? Maybe. But I don't know how that looks, to be honest. Given that our election is 2 years away, I'm not sure that that's going to work. Now, that said, do I want it to happen? Hell yeah. This government has not really helped us at all. Okay, next question. Is the commonly quoted 70-30 owner-occupier to investor split still accurate? What percentage of the market do investors take up today? I'm not qualified to answer that question specifically. I really don't know. Whatever the ratio is, I don't see the ratio changing. What I see is the investors changing what they invest in. Anyone who wants to get ahead and is motivated to actually get ahead, they are still going to be, the money finds a way. So if they are wanting to invest in some way, shape or form, they will find ways to invest in some way, shape or form. So I don't think it's really going to change. I think it might change the kind of stock that they own. So they're no longer going to, I guess, hold an asset that might be secondhand in nature. They're going to be buying brand spanking new. But I don't think that the money will leave. I think the ratio is going to say whatever it is, it's going to stay there. What's your opinion on how the new budget will impact inflation? Simple. It's not going to help at all because they're still spending beyond their limits. And if they're spending beyond their limits, then the cost of living has to go up. Just the sheer interest on the debt alone, they've not cut it. They've just added to the budget. So inflation is inevitable. Interest rates are the big stick to actually bring that back down. And I think it's how long it's going to take to actually get there. What is the economic link between immigration numbers and push for growth? Why is higher immigration numbers necessary for economic growth? That's a really interesting question. And the reason is that from an economy's perspective, or we have the greatest number of people being the boomers that I guess came out of Second World War. I guess huge number of people born in that very, very short period of time. They're now getting to the point of retirement and old age. They're no longer generating income, and so no longer being taxed. Right, but those boomers, as they came through, didn't have anywhere near as much children as what happened at that period of time. So the number of people that we have in Australia to pay taxes to pay their pensions and pay their healthcare and all that sort of stuff, we don't have enough people to fund all of that. So we need immigration to come in. So we've got more people to tax so we can fund paying the pensions to the boomers and all that sort of thing. Now, going back in time, they predicted that way in advance, and that's why they created things like self-managed super funds. That's why they created the opportunity for us to actually do negative gearing, and so we can fund our own retirement, right? But what they've gone and done is to say, well, now you can't fund your own retirement. Now you have to live on the system, and the only way that the system's going to survive is we bring more people in and tax the bejesus out of them when they come through. So we need immigration to keep the economy alive. There's no choice. That's why we've had more than 2 million people over the last couple of years come into Australia. So I don't see under the current regime that changing significantly. And even under the new regime, I think they want to cut immigration, but I think they know that they probably can't for the next little while. So I don't think it's going to be a radical change in the next little bit. Okay, with new build residentials being exempt from the new CGT rules, is this likely to see development costs further increase as demand for new builds increase? Will this result in it being more difficult to get deals to stack up? Absolutely, categorically, no. What I'm seeing is the exact opposite of that particular statement. What it's meaning is that we've got less demand for secondhand property, meaning that the prices of the stock that is developable is going down. So it's the best buying opportunity we've seen for a long period of time. All of the investors are moving to want brand new builds. So that is increasing demand for the brand new builds, which is pushing the price up for the new builds, not the cost to construct. That's not going up because of that mechanism. That's going up because the cost of materials are going up and the cost of labor is going up, and the cost of labor is going up because inflation's going up. And when inflation goes up, people want pay rises so that they can actually afford to pay. So I guess the cost of construction is going up as a result of our economy. Nothing more, nothing less. Okay. That said, I've got a couple more questions here, but we're coming to the finishing straight, folks. If we knock a property down and build 2 new dwellings, are we getting all the benefits for both, or only the new stock that is the add-on? And what they mean by that is, well, I had 1 and now I have 2, so one of those is really not really adding to supply. I don't think that's how it's seen. It's seen that I guess there is I guess there's new supply as a result of that particular project. So both of those assets, I interpret that to be the answer. Now, that said, there is no definition at this moment in time on what that new build is. That is one of the ministerial discretions that is waiting to be defined. But I would, in my humble opinion, think that that is not, I guess, anything to actually worry about. Okay. Are investors increasingly shifting towards commercial property? We've already covered that one. No is the answer. I think maybe inside self-managed super funds, because you can still do limited recourse lending for commercial in self-managed super funds. I think that definitely will be a thing. Absolutely. So, but I don't see that in I guess normal investors side of things, because their borrowing capacity in their own personal names hasn't really changed. So whatever you could borrow, well, actually it has changed because you can't do the negative gearing. The only way they can get their borrowing capacity is if they're buying brand new stock. So otherwise, if they're buying secondhand stock, they can't claim negative gearing. So it changes their borrowing capacity. So I don't think that's going to be that big change. No. Next one, if I have approximately 200K in an SMSF, how could I use it to participate in property development? Okay, this one's bordering on advice, so I have to be extraordinarily careful here. So this is not me telling you what to do, okay? But you asked what is possible to do. So firstly, 200K from a self-managed super fund perspective with regards to doing a development inside your SMSF as cash. Okay, so if you're trying to do it, the deal within SMSF itself, buy it, develop it, fund it, that sort of thing, 200K is not going to be able to get the job done. Okay, the next thing, SMSF can't do limited recourse lending, so it can't buy residential property. So buying the raw stock can't be done. And equally, the SMSF cannot borrow to improve the property. So from that perspective, it can't be done double whammy in the same deal. Okay, so the only thing it can do is that 200K could reach out of the SMS and invest in a development where you're actually either lending money into that, buying shares into a development where you might do a profit split, those sorts of things. Now, you've got to be super careful here that once it jumps outside of the SMSF into, let's just say, the real world, that it cannot be your development that it is actually investing into, or at least you cannot have a controlling interest in that development. And I believe that the controlling interest is in the vicinity of 50%. But you might be able to invest in someone else's development, for example, okay? And someone else might be able to invest in your development. So you might be able to go, look, I can't invest in my own because there's some rules, but I need to have an arm's length transaction. I'm going to invest in your project over here. Okay, and then if someone else happens to invest in your project by coincidence because you're needing some funds, not I guess a conditional element, and so long as it's an arm's length transaction, and so long as you get sign off by both your accountant and your solicitor, there's an opportunity there, right? But you will absolutely be able to invest in someone's project if it's not yours. Okay. Can super still be used to buy property under single contract with borrowing? No, because you can't do limited recourse lending anymore. So the only way that super could do that is if it had the cash to do that. So I don't think that's going to be possible. Can my self-managed super fund invest in my other company or unit trust to purchase units and receive payment when the project is completed? Would that arrangements be deemed a legal conflict of interest? Almost certainly that would be deemed to be not allowed. Okay, if you're doing anything like that, you need to speak to your accountant who specializes in self-managed super fund. Please do not speculatively just go and do that. You are likely to blow yourself up. Every super fund has a compulsory audit every single year, and if you break the rules, you are going to get caught. So please don't try to break the rules. If I complete a 1 into 2 development, sell one property and keep the other one, will I need to pay tax on the property I sell? Yes, you are selling a property. They want tax every single time you generate revenue. So there will be GST on the one that you actually sell, okay? And there will potentially be a deemed sale on the one that you've actually got. You need to actually speak to your accountant with regards to that. If I demolish an existing investment property and build a duplex or 2 townhouses, but completion occurs after the 1st of July, will the old or new capital gains tax rules still apply? Well, for you specifically, because you're developing it, when you sell it, it's actually GST for you. But the incoming purchaser, because you complete it after the 1st of July 2027, they would absolutely get all of the benefits. As a matter of fact, even if you did it before the 1st of July 2027, as I explained earlier on, because it's brand spanking new, they would get both of the benefits. So I don't see any implication of that at all. Okay. What are the tax and structuring implications of renovating existing dwelling, building a new one at the rear, and placing both on separate titles? I can't talk to the tax or structuring implications, but what I would say, you are renovating one and building a brand new on the other. So what you're creating here, one of them is a second-hand property. So when you sell that second-hand property, there would be no incentives to the incoming purchaser on that particular property. Now, the one at the rear is a brand new property and has been as a result of a brand new supply. So selling that one whilst it's brand new, and this is the important part, whilst it's brand new, would get the incoming purchaser getting the negative gearing and capital gains tax discounts on that one. So hoping that kind of explains that one fully. So there you have it, folks. That is, I guess, well and truly over an hour worth of questions and answers specifically on the budget. So I'm going to say thank you very much for that. If you've enjoyed this show, we have a one-day event coming up. I guess specifically how to go from investor to developer, because I see so many people moving from the investing world into the developing world as a result of all of this. So please, if that is of interest, please go to our events page. See if I can actually find that on my little links here. I cannot find that. Actually, if you just go to this link here, this is us running all of our meetups around the country: Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, and Perth. Plus that webinar is also on there. Please go there and actually have a look at that. That is going to be held on the 12th of September. It is a Sunday and it goes from 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Can be very worthwhile. How to go from investor to developer in this new regime, how and why it's all, I guess, leaning in the favor of that being the outcome. So that being the best way forward if you are truly wanting to invest and invest at a wholesale rate, not a retail rate. There you have it, folks. That is, I guess, open mic night for this particular month. If you, I guess, would like to participate in open mic night, that is where you can ask me any question you like and try and, I guess, get me to assist you on your property development journey. Click on the link below, propdev.info/open-mic, and I will do what I can to prepare for that and give you the answers at our next episode. That said, folks, hope you've enjoyed the show, and I look forward to seeing you at our very next meetup. Till then, bye for now. Bye.